To the Aotearoa Azure meetup. Thank you for everyone for coming online at the last minute, given the incidents that's happened today in Auckland. Our thoughts go out to those affected in today's events, ka roha hoki, to those who've been affected. Our thoughts go out to them. So today we've got a couple of topics that we have on today for you. So we've got Daniel Scott-Raynsford, DSR, who'll be presenting on OpenAI, Ahmed, who's going to be presenting on the Azure News, and Indira and Akash from DataEngine discussing Generative AI Mesh. So with these topics, it is going to be more hands-on and demos. So prayer to the demo gods that everything goes all right for our presenters today. Going forward, please go on mute or raise a hand on Teams if you have any questions. There will be additional time at the end of the session for an open mic. And without further ado, we're just going to do a bit of housekeeping as well. So we would like to thank our sponsors, Capgemini, who is our Microsoft partner for Azure Dynamics and Modern Work. They were sponsoring today's pizzas, which were unfortunately cancelled, but they have been our sponsors thus far, and we thank you for their ongoing support. A bit of a code of conduct. So we'd like to provide a safe place in our tech community to share, learn, and build your network. So please be kind and respectful to others, particularly as they are sharing their knowledge with you and sharing their time with you on this forum. Also, we would like to put a call out for anyone who would be interested in speaking at our future meetups. So please just click on that QR code or that aka.ms Auckland Azure speaker and just fill out a form to register your interest and share some war stories that you'd like to share with the community, some of the learnings that you may have had with different technologies that you've utilised on Azure. So going forward, we'd love to have... sorry, can someone please go on mute? Thank you. So we'd love to have more topics that are more hands-on and demo-orientated and are more real-life scenarios rather than just a level 100. So keen to get more speakers to join our community on stage. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Ahmed, who's going to talk to us about the latest in the Azure News. Over to you, mate.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chimes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wait, let me just share my screen. Yeah, so Azure News is just a new section we are introducing in the meetup. So it just talks about some exciting good news that have been Microsoft Azure News in the last month. So for this month, we've got, actually this was just introduced yesterday, which is a really exciting thing. That is the Bing chat for enterprise. What that means is that the idea behind this is that this is the same Bing chat that we all know and love, but with the added commercial data protection. So the idea is that enterprises could actually use this tool now to send sensitive data and then commercial data. So if you are looking up, working on a project and looking up information on the web, before you wouldn't be able to use Bing Chat AI because of the fear of leaking sensitive data. Now you can do that with this enterprise version of Bing AI. So the idea is that your data will be private. It's not going to be used by Microsoft to train the model. What gets in and comes out just remains protected, and it's not safe. The other thing that also was introduced yesterday in the Microsoft Inspire 2023 is that they've now given prices for Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is a $30 a month, I believe that's US dollar, for enterprise users per user. The other exciting thing is now is that Microsoft DevBox is now generally available. So just to give you like a small idea of what is DevBox, it is like a workstation built on top of Windows 365. The idea is that it's tailored toward developer. You could build your own image with all your applications and then tools built in. and you could use, now they're actually introducing configuration as a code. So that would help speed up spending workload and workstation for your team. And it could coming with the security and the all the manageability built in with Microsoft Intune and the Microsoft Endpoint Management. And the last major news actually was that Microsoft is rebranding the Azure AD to become Microsoft Entra ID now. It's the same capabilities, same licensing, just a new name. All the API signing and the APIs and all the existing development configuration, everything just stays the same. It's only the name changed into Microsoft Entra ID. And then the idea is that to simplify product naming and then unify the product family. And that's for me today. Back to you, Chimes.
Thanks, Ahmed. Stellar summary. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand on Teams, or we can open it for the end of the session. So DSR, Daniel, when you're ready, if you'd like to share your screen, we'll take us through for the next 30 minutes with hands-on Azure OpenAI.
Cool.
And please join on mute if you're just joining this Teams call. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chimes and Ahmed. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Apologies about all the changes today. We hope you didn't get stuck outside the office. But yeah, we're really glad to have you with us today. Hey, I'm going to focus on the demos, and what I'm going to show today is public preview. So you may, these features may change, as we all know. That's what it's all about. The public preview is all about. But I just wanted to set a little bit of a stage first before we move on. Is we've all read the news. We've all, I don't know, anyone in the chat or anyone who wants to put their hands up, who uses these generative AI tools to help them do their job? And I'm going to say me. I'll start. Anyone else? Pretty sure most of you have used them. And I'm also going to throw out, and don't put your hands up for this one, none of you have shared any kind of sensitive information in these tools ever, right? No one's ever done that, but we know people have. We've seen it. We've seen it in the news, and rightly or wrongly, people want to do a great job. They want access to these tools because they know how powerful they are, and we've only just reached the tip of the iceberg of what they are able to do. So what we want to focus on today is how can you get access to this stuff, use this technology, this amazing technology, in a safe way where you're not going to leak data. So 2 questions I get asked a lot. Well, I get asked a lot of questions, but these 2 come up often. So the first is, how do I provide my people access to generative AI without risking exposing my private data? It's question number 1. And the second one is, how do I enable generative AI to use my company's private data? So, it's all great. You're using Gen AI to, answer difficult questions and bring information together for you and summarize it, but it's only got access to the stuff that it was trained on or the public internet, but you've got a lot of valuable private insights inside your organization. So how do you get access to that? So we're going to show you a way to do that. There is lots of other ways, and I've got some links to some other methods that you can have a look at in your own time. Just want to start by saying this is all going to use Azure OpenAI. Now, Azure OpenAI Service, I'm not going to go into Gen AI and what it is and how it works. I'm going to basically say that these are the OpenAI models provided by the OpenAI company OpenAI inside Azure. But they are run by Microsoft. So the inference, the compute is provided by Microsoft. It is running inside Microsoft's environment. And that comes with a whole lot of assurances. And I've listed them here. I highly recommend you go and review this page if you are thinking about any of this technology. But really what it comes down to is your data is your data. The models are not trained or retrained or fine-tuned using your data. Anything you send to it is private. It's yours. You have your own input. Blah-da-da. Just have a look at that. So what I'm going to take you through today is an architecture. So this is an architecture where you often call it retrieval augmented generation. It is where we are going to provide our own data for the models to reason over. And this pattern is considered retrieval augmented generation, where we start by putting our data into some location, usually Azure storage. These would be documents. A lot of documents might be PDFs, Word documents, and we will put those into Azure storage. And then we'll break that data down into chunks, and there's a good reason, which we'll talk about in a minute. That data is then put inside an index. That index, at the moment, we're going to use Azure Cog Search. It could be a number of different technologies. There are many different technologies that are available to do this. We're going to use Azure Cog Search for this. And if you're not familiar with Azure Cognitive Search, it is fundamentally an indexing service. It is not the master copy of your data, but it provides you with a very powerful, searchable and scalable index. That index is then available to be used to look up data when your user types in their prompt. So they type in something like, I need to know if you were building a service that helped users understand the building codes of New Zealand, which I'm sure we all would love to know all about. Perhaps you have an index of all those documents. A user might say, well, what do I need to know about insulation, the thickness of them, and standards required for a modern New Zealand house? That question would then be formed into a keyword search, and anyone wants to tell me why that and how that could be improved, chuck it in the chat, because I know many of you are aching to say that already. That would a keyword search. That data is then pulled from the index, fed into the prompt as grounding or context. And then the model is fed to the model along with that grounding information, and we get a response back. Now, what we are going to do today is demonstrate how easy it is to build this. It seems complicated, but we can do it in a few clicks. I'm going to call out some of the team. So Luke Murray, who's one of our MVPs, he's done a great blog post on this. Vic Padana, who's in my team, he's done an amazing video on this. And Shane Baldacchino, our chief architect, he's done an amazing look at alternate ways of building this. I've got links to all of this stuff, so you don't feel free, pick up your own pattern, use what makes sense to you. So demo God's time. Okay, number one. We are in the Azure portal. Everything we're going to do is in the Azure portal. Everything we could do could be done via Terraform, Bicep, code, you name it. Don't have to do it in the portal, but it makes for a more interesting or more engaging demo. So I have created a resource group, and it's very empty. Now, by the way, I have prepared all the content because you don't want to sit around waiting for things to deploy, but I'm going to demonstrate how I would do it. So first thing I'm going to need is an Azure OpenAI service. So I'm going to create one of those. Now, Azure OpenAI Service is a restricted service. It requires you to get access to use it. You get access, there is a link we can share if you need to. You get access to it at a subscription level. And if I go and search for OpenAI, I can create one of these. And of course, many of you who use Azure will be very familiar with this. Select my resource group, select a region. There are, wow, okay, Japan East just got lit up. So yes, there are 6 regions. I believe there was 5 as of right now. I'm going to use East US. I'm going to call this AOAI. Only one pricing tier is 0. Next. I can put this inside a network. Keep that in mind. If I had requirements to say I need to put my entire environment in a network, I can do that, but I'm not going to do that for this demo. Leave that to an exercise for yourself. So the usual deployment, I'm going to click create, off we go. Now I'm going to, of course, not sit around and wait for that because I've already done one of these. It won't take very long to deploy, but I'm going to hit here. So once I've deployed it, I'll just hit home and here is one I prepared earlier. Once I've deployed it, I have an Azure OpenAI resource. I typically am not going to do much in here. The next thing I will need to do is choose a model to deploy. Now, if I go in here, it will not let me deploy models. It will say, I need to manage them over here. So if I click that button, or if I click over here in the Explore, prefer to go this way, the Explore will open up what we call the AI, the Azure AI Studio. This takes a couple of seconds. Now, the Azure AI Studio is where we're going to do 90% of the rest of the work, right? There is some more resources we need to deploy, but once we land here, the next thing we're going to need to do is choose a model to deploy. So if we head over to Models, now, you might go, well, which model do I need to deploy? If you're building a chat service, you've really only got 3 choices. You've got ChatGPT 3, well, 4 choices. ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, ChatGPT 3.5, I'll even zoom in, ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo 16K. You've also got an older version of ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, don't need to use that. And there's also the ChatGPT 4, or the GPT, they actually call the GPT-4 models. Now, I do not have access to GPT-4 directly. It is a fairly, it's a service that is reserved for more important people than myself. So we're going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo, and we're going to use the 0613. That is the latest version from OpenAI. So what I do is tick the little box, click deploy. Now, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to use the 16K model. Now, the 16K model has a longer context window. It can accept more tokens. I might not need 16K tokens, but I just like to have all the things, so I'm going to have that. So I'm just going to call this GPT 3.5 Turbo 16K. It gives it a name. Now, this is important because this name is actually in the URL endpoint that will be exposed for your service. It's your endpoint. No one else gets access to it. So you might have multiple copies of GPT 3.5 Turbo running in your environment. You might have one for your accounts team to use, one for your business development team to use. That's up to you. We can also set a content filter. So there is by default a default content filter, and I won't change that, but you can customize content filters. Perhaps your accounts team are a little bit more problematic with what they use. We all know accounts teams. You could be more aggressive with a content filter. But the other thing to think about here as well is tokens per minute rate limit. So this is where people get tripped up a lot. It's a little bit. The docs are not as good as they could be. They'll be improved. But basically, this governs how much data you can push through that single deployment in a minute. And it also influences both the tokens and the requests. But I'm going to just leave this at 120,000. That's a lot of tokens, by the way. So that'll probably be fine for what I need. So that will go and deploy. And now I've got a deployment. Bingo. Doesn't go very quick to deploy. Now I've got the deployment, I'm going to go and head up to the chat, and I can now start to use that deployment. So I can now start to build an AI assistant. I can say, actually, rather than you having to watch me type, I have some questions I pre-wrote. Now, it's only so you don't have to see me type. And of course, I haven't finished the deployment. Rather than wait for the deployment to finish, I will go to the one that I have finished. It's still not. Okay, so it's going to take 5 minutes to finish. I shouldn't have deleted all my deployments just before this. So I've got several more of these, which is very, very handy. So bear with me. As you can see, I might use a UK one instead. Okay. I will switch back to my East US one in a moment for specifically because I actually want all my data in East US. So this is my UK version of the service. I'll explore again. Clearly, I haven't prayed to the demo gods enough for, I forgot there was a 5-minute window of deployment. So now I've got, just check that's all good. So it's the same model. I actually just gave it a different name. So now this is the UK and it's done a fairly good job. That's nice enough. I'm actually going to get another question I wrote earlier, which was more fun around building stuff. So here we go. Now, there's a reason why I'm asking this question. This question is probably, the answer is probably okay, but it's not actually as good as it could be. If I provided more context, for perhaps with my private data, I would actually get a better answer. And this is what we're going to demonstrate next. Now, the other problem I have is if you wanted to provide this to your users, you do not probably want the accounts team in the Azure portal or the Azure OpenAI playground. You really don't. You want to give them an interface that's simple. So we're going to show you how to do that. But we're also going to suggest you probably want to bring your own data. So I'm just going to switch back to my East US one briefly, just to see if it's deployed yet. Because I want to use that one. And while it does that, because I'll still be able to do the rest of this. So now that one is finished deployed, I'm back to East US. So I've now got this Add Your Data preview. So if I click this button, it brings me to this panel here. This is where I can add data sources. Now, I've got multiple options when I do this. When I do it, I've got 3 choices. I can either specify an Azure Cognitive Search that already exists. It's a pre-built, an index that I have pre-built myself. Now, I don't want to do that because that's a little bit more work. I can also select Azure Blob Storage as the source of my data. That's probably the option I'm going to go for because all I need is a Cog Search resource and an Azure Blob Storage resource, which are easy. I've probably got them lying around. What I'm going to quickly switch to is show you my storage. So this is my blob storage. It's just a standard Azure blob storage. I'm not going to show you how to deploy that. Figure that's an easy one to look up if you're not familiar. So I have basically a container of files. This is stuff I nabbed off the government website on building regulations and electrical safety regulations. I might have hundreds of these documents, but I didn't want to bring all of them. I just pop them in a storage account. Simple as that. Nothing. I put them in the same region though as my Azure OpenAI service. Now I didn't actually need to do this, but it's just a good practice. So if I head back over here, I can now specify that storage. So once I do, it will say here's my NZX. Now it's also asking me for a cognitive search resource. Now this is the index I was talking about before. Now I've already deployed one. I will quickly show you how to deploy a resource of this type, just in case you're not familiar. But we don't have to do a lot of configuration with this. It's a very straightforward resource, and the Azure OpenAI service will take care of the configuration of that for us. So if I look for cognitive search, this is the one I want. I can go and create one of these. I, of course, want East US. This is very important. You want your cognitive search in the same region as your OpenAI service. You don't want networking charges, sending data, or the latency of sending between regions. But be aware, Azure OpenAI service only available in 6 regions now. Just be aware of that fact, especially if you do need to send your data out. Perhaps you have data that you need to send to that service that is, covered under data residency requirements or anything like that. You need to consider what you're sending before you deploy any of this. So I will just call this DSR AAM, AOAI, COG, whatever. I can choose scale. So again, there is a minimum amount. You can go for the pricing, a lower pricing tier, and I could actually go for the free tier. But again, there are limits. Check what you can and can't do with the free and basic. You can use the free, so I'll just use the free one. And of course, I will click create, but I've already deployed one of these. So heading back to our service, too many windows. I've already deployed one of these. So I've got this AOAI cog search service that I've deployed. I now need to, once it finishes analyzing that, I need to enter an index name. Now, this is the index that is created by the service, and it will contain all of the documents in that folder broken down into chunks. So I'm going to call this NZX2 because I already know I've actually deployed this, created an NZX index, and I'll click next and save and close. Now, this will tell me that my data is being added, and it'll take a few minutes. And interestingly enough, this is the work of chunking, reading those documents, chunking them up is done in the browser. So don't close your browser window. So in a real, scenario, you might want to consider how do you actually do that in a more scalable way? If I add new documents, what happens? What do I do? At this point in time, you need to delete your index and recreate it. Not fun. So you might consider how you would automate that. Now, it's very simple. There is lots of documentation and guidance, and we even provide helpful repos. But in this service right now, you have to do it. You'll have to manually do that. It's not hard though. What's actually going to happen? So in the background, in our cog search, let's see, I've got way too many windows. Here is my cog search service. So this is typical Azure service. I have got some, where am I? I have got my indexes. So if I select the indexes, you will see I've got NZX2 and NZ. This is my original NZX. It will take a few minutes for this data to land in the index. But as you can see, I've got 59 documents in my index. Anyone want to guess or take an idea of why are there 59 when I only had 3 documents in my container, in my storage container? Luke, I know you know the answer to this.
Because it's chunked it up.
Exactly, totally. So it's taken those 3 documents and it's broken them down. Now, why is this necessary? And that is because every model has a token limit or a context window limit. That is the number of tokens that they can accept. Now, remember I chose a model GPT-3.5 Turbo 16K. That model can take 16,000 tokens in its window. Guarantee these government documents way longer than 16,000 tokens. So what this system does is that it breaks that into chunks and then stores the chunks. Now, if we actually have a look at each chunk, let's check how we're going. We're all right. We can see that we have content, we have the file it was sourced from, we have the URL, actually the raw blob URL, and we have a title. Now, this is how it's all used to search that by the index. So we've now built our index. So we can now go and use that index to ask questions. So let me just check. So here's our news NZX number 2, and it's told us it's reset the chat. I'm actually going to grab I'll clear that to make it a little bit simpler, and I will grab my text and run the query. So again, I'm using the same model, but this time what's happening is it's going and it's still indexing. So I'm going to use my one that I prepared earlier. I swear I've got that somewhere. Wait, I've got one already deployed. What it will actually do is it will now use that index. I'll actually use a pre-indexed one that I've got here. This, I used some slightly different index, some different data. I actually used some data from Azure OpenAI or OpenAI Generative AI white papers, but it demonstrates the example fairly well. So what's actually going to happen here? This is using a different index. It's using the research index, which I built, much bigger index. It is going to go off, look at the index for anything to do with long prompts or prompt length, look at all that research, and then basically give me a summary and say, this is why this is a problem. Now, it's also going to refer me back, once this finishes loading, it's going to refer me to the documents, the source documents. So this has given me an answer, and it's also given me a reference to Unmasking the Giant, a comprehensive evaluation of ChatGPT's programming proficiency, which is a great read, by the way, if you're really so inclined. But that's great. We've now got a ChatGPT or a ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo that is looking at our data. What we really need to do is make that available to users in a nicer way. So some of you may have noticed that we have this deploy to button. This allows us to deploy to a new web app. Right now, we've only got a web app as a choice. We can type the name of the web app. I'm going to call this TSRAM Demo 1. I'll put this in a subscription. Select a resource group. We'll try this one here. Select a location. Again, we probably want this as close to our service as possible. Pricing plan, I will make it really basic, and acknowledge that this will incur some charges. So it is going to deploy some resources. Now, again, I'm not going to wait for this to happen. Now, just notice this big yellow box at the top. This is really important. If you deploy this, I'll zoom in. If you deploy this, it is a public service. It is publicly available on a public URL. But this, it's gone away. This service will automatically configure the Azure web app to have Azure AD identity authentication on it. So we use your Azure AD tenant to allow you to prevent or only allow authenticated users to log in. So that's a really good thing. But you might want to make it more secure. Luke, I know you talked about this. How else could you make this service even more secure?
Because Azure OpenAI is built into Azure, all the functionalities and the services like Azure RBAC, you can have OpenAI and private endpoints, so you can add it to your own network. You could also put it in front of Azure API management as well, and use Azure API management to sit in front of Azure OpenAI, and use that to control who has access and what things inside or outside your organization. So I think it's a key differentiator with Azure OpenAI is the ability to leverage private endpoints, bring that data, bring the infrastructure into your own environment, and use Azure to its full capabilities.
Awesome. No, yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, perfect. That's the key. You can get as secure as you want. You have to decide what are your requirements. Now, just one other thing I'd add. Even if you put this inside a virtual network, put as much security around it as you should. Do you really want to be sending things like PII or sensitive data to the models? That is a decision you need to make as a business or an organization. What do you want to be allowing with the service? And that, we always recommend you've got to assess your scenario, decide what makes sense for you. And if you don't want sensitive data at all going to the service, even if it's safe to, completely isolated, protected, not used for training, etc., you still need to have that discussion. I think that's an important part of responsible AI. So now that we've said that, once we've deployed the app, we have this launch web app, and that will take us to the web app, which I've already got, I'm sure you've heard me before, deployed. This is the web app. I will open it up again. because I'm using a basic tier, it actually shuts down when it's not in use, so it takes a little while to wake up. If you chose to, you could have it in a more expensive tier. So that will take a couple of seconds to wake, but while it does that, I will go and show you the resources that have been deployed. So this is what actually gets deployed. So there is a web app, an app service plan. So this is my NZX demo. It's a standard app service plan. It's actually Linux. So the deployed web app is actually a Linux web app. We can actually have a look at that web app. Now it is built, if we have a look at the deployment center, we can see it is built from a GitHub repo. That GitHub repo is public, and you can fork it, create your own and customize it the way you might want to put your own branding. You might want to do a whole bunch of different stuff. You can go and do that. It's pretty simple stuff. Highly recommend if you want to, customize it. Just don't forget, this is a public preview service. Could change. If you do change, if anything does change, remember to merge the upstream. So if that's still loading, I think that might have loaded now. There we go. So we're now in this is our service. It's pretty basic. We could add more stuff to it if we want to, but we can now ask, I think this is the research one. So I will get a research question out that I've asked previously. How can we avoid problems with long context? So what it's doing is going off to my Azure OpenAI service. It is going and retrieving information. It is then giving me a result. What it was actually doing is hitting this web app, which is here. It is looking at all the configuration, which we can change, by the way. If we decide, hey, we need to change the the system message, or we want to change which index it's using, which cognitive search index. If we want to change perhaps using a different model, all of these things are available for us to change. So we can configure this, change these values, restart the app, and we're good to go. So that's kind of the power of this. It is very flexible, but it is quite basic. So if you're looking at something more powerful, more extensible, have a look at Shane's blog post, which I've got at the end of my slides. Check out Vic and Luke's videos and posts as well. There's a whole lot more you can do with this. This is just the start. So I'm pretty much on time. We're running a little bit late, but I'm going to wrap it up now. Okay, I did have to throw this in. Bing Chat Enterprise, obviously, some of what I've been sharing with you is you can do with Bing Chat Enterprise, but not everyone's going to have access to it, understand that. So this is an opportunity or a possibility of you building something of your own that suits your specific purposes and needs. Plus you get to learn and control it more. You get a whole lot of other stuff you can do. But just thought I'd throw that in. That came out yesterday. So here is the 4 links. Vic's video, which pretty much covers this and more. Luke's blog post, Shane's awesome blog post as well. He does something similar with Azure Container Apps, front door, a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Completely awesome. So do check that stuff out, and I'm going to hand back to you, Chimes.
Oh, thanks so much, Zoran and Luke, for pitching in on that as well. We do have a few questions, but for the sake of time, we'll cover it at the end of Indira and Akasha's section. So in Indira and Akasha, if you're ready, I'd like you to start presenting. So while they get their slide up, we've got Indira and Akash from DataEngine, who's going to present on Generative AI Mesh. So thanks, team. Take it away.
Can you guys see the PowerPoint? Is that coming through?
Yep, we can see the presenter view.
Oh, hold up. Beginning. How's that? A lot better?
Much better.
Okay, cool. Thank you, team. So what we'll do is today we're going to build on the story, I guess, that Dan and the team kind of talked about. I guess what we're going to do is we're launching a product today, I guess, which is on Microsoft Azure. We're going to go through what it is, what does it do, and what problem it solves at a very high level. We do have a demo at the end, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that we articulated that Dan actually ran through will articulate the final outcome of it. I guess the key thing is how you customize it to the needs. So we may skip the demo. We'll see how we go with time at the end of the day. Now, I guess the key thing we're doing today is we're launching world first generative AI data mesh and practices product. So we're bringing together 3 fundamentals, which you'll see together, and we want to help organizations start their AI journey at 70%. And that's from a technology architecture perspective, that's from a practice perspective, and that's also LLMs, because large language models are pre-trained, so you can actually get value out of them pretty quickly. And that's the fundamentals, is how do you start your journey as an organization at 70% today. Now, I'm not only presenting alone, but I'll do a quick intro and hand it to Indra to do a quick overview of herself. But my name's Akash Atan, so I'm the CEO and founder of DataEngine. My background's been product management, worked in Australia for 9 years in Telstra, built products like WebEx Teams and also a few other cloud solutions there. Jumped to New Zealand and worked with larger sort of Spark organization, multiple subsidiaries. And yeah, I'm a geek at heart, but also love commercializing solutions at a high level. I'm going to change the camera to Indra.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Indira and I joined as a data architect a month ago now. It just flew by. And I have been in New Zealand working on mainly data stack, CRM and SQL Server stack for the last 20 years. And I have a passion to teach technology to everyone, kids and whoever. So in my pastime, I run SQL and Power BI classes to kids. And my main strengths are in Azure and Power BI and Microsoft Power Platform. Yeah.
Yep. And you're an MVP too?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm a Microsoft MVP for the 5th time.
Cool. So Tim, we're just going to do a bit of the sizzle on the company and we'll get straight to the product and everything else. I guess DataEngine, who are we? We are a new startup. We're about 6 years old now. Our differentiation is really we help businesses bridge the communication between IT and the business, and you'll see that in the offer that we're taking to market. We are also solutions agnostic, so we don't really care about what the tech is. You know, it could be blob storage or data warehouse, but I guess what we try to understand is what is the eventual outcome and then help companies design the right solution. We balance strategy with, I guess everyone's been through digital transformation and it can be scary. So what we try to do is balance the pragmatic approach with strategic outcomes. And we also bring the right methodology. You'll see that we've sort of brought data ops into New Zealand. We look at agile safe, we look at ML ops, but what we try to do is not try to shoehorn everything into one methodology, but take the best of each piece based on the organizational structure and then bring that to make things successful at the end of the day. Now, just on our journey, as I sort of mentioned, we started data. We also run a meetup called New Zealand Data Ops, which you may have come to in your life. And that's something that we kicked off in 2018. It's about 1,000 followers across New Zealand and Australia. We do partner with all the universities, Auckland, Victoria, Canterbury University, do a lot of mentoring and training, so we give back a lot. We run GovHack New Zealand, which is the largest sort of hackathon in Australia and New Zealand. We've also assisted with the consumer data rights legislation, which is kicking in now. If you haven't heard about it, please Google it up. It's going to impact everyone in stages. And we've also, with Microsoft, actually deployed the only data mesh solution for a very large organization in Australia that's been fully implemented with strategic buy-in from the executives and has been deployed in domains. So, and that's been a big win for us. And also we're focusing on a lot of Maori data sovereignty going forward to assist New Zealanders understand what it is, what it isn't, and how to tackle it in organizations. Now, everything that I've mentioned does apply to the offering that we're bringing to market. But before we get there, at a very high level, I guess you all know executives are seeing this as an opportunity, but also as a risk, as sort of Dan highlighted in one of his slides, you know, all those pain points. But I mean, fundamentally, there's a lot of research, and I'm probably going to focus on 1 or 2 here. They believe that 40% of working hours across industry can be impacted by large language models. Okay. They also think that it's actually going to absorb 60 to 70% of employees' time today. The reason why is LLMs help with communication and language. Anything that we use with languages to interface with humans at a high level can be automated or can be assisted with ChatGPT, generative AI, whatever you want to call it, I guess, in the situation. So the impacts are huge to the world, and it's a revolution, and it's an inflection point in the entire industry. So organizations need to figure out how to use it, not to be left behind, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind. You're going to have higher cost to serve. You're going to have less customers. So how do you tackle those things right now? And that's what we're assisting with our products. Now, the two devils, well, one's a devil and one's an angel. We've been talking to customers and executives predominantly, okay, and architects and technical engineers. The key concerns they had is, am I exposing my data? Am I opening up my data? Is this a new cool toy? Is this scary? Is it going to replace our jobs? We've had that conversation too. I don't trust this thingy-majigger thingy that's chatting to me. How do I use it? Am I complying with NZICM, ISO 27001, NIST, all of these frameworks? Am I breaking something on the way? Which is processes usually, and am I breaking any ethical boundaries? And these are the questions that we're sort of seeing pop out that's limiting creating a swirl of not adopting generative AI as a whole. Now, what we are bringing to the market is how do we actually assist with governance? How do we improve ownership and accessibility when you use this type of technology? How do we actually have methodology to get value out of this tech very quickly? How do we secure the platform? How do you have availability? How do you manage sensitive data? So we've got practices and frameworks to manage sensitive data and solutions like Synapse and Delta Lake and also blob storage. So how do you provide that? How do you meet the regulatory and compliance needs? How do you have patterns for building out use cases? So Dan went through a couple of use cases that was on blob storage. What are those patterns for different outcomes at the end of the day? What are the best practices? And does this need to be in a landing zone as a whole to actually isolate this? And how do we align to New Zealand NZICM and ISO 27001, which is the tick box that everyone will need to go through in some shape or form through the security team. So what we're trying to do here is with this product is, Dan's done an awesome job to go through how it's built and stuff, but we're putting the wrapper to give business and executive confidence. So when you go to them and say, we need to leverage this technology, we can have the frameworks wrapped around it so they can actually say yes, such as privacy impact assessments. How do we manage ethical questionnaires around it? How do we tackle Maori data sovereignty? So that's what we're bringing to the table to accelerate the adoption across the wider business as a whole. Now, I'm just going to quickly stop and take a bit of a breath, but the key thing is what the ingredients of this solution is. Really, we're taking the Azure Generative AI, so it's an Azure-only platform and that we're launching. Okay. Ingredients number two is we're applying the data mesh learnings that we've got in market, the real life implementation and the headaches that we picked up on the way when applying data mesh for a very large organization. We are applying the data and governance practices with guidelines. So this is to give the business and the executives confidence that the solution that we're building or you're building is going to provide those tick boxes so you don't do anything naughty at the end of the day at a very high level. And together, that's what we're combining and calling generative AI mesh. Okay, so generative AI, data mesh plus data and governance practices with guidelines. And it's a safe place for you to innovate with AI across the business. Cool. Now, just in case Copilot, I think the launch yesterday or day before, team, sorry, it might be different hours, but I guess we're slightly different. Our solution is more about control. It's an isolated environment with, security wrapper, RBAC, a whole bunch of things, ownership, policy documents that allow you to safely innovate. But also, I think Dan sort of said, you've got to double check the PII information that you're releasing into this environment is approved by the business. We help with frameworks to get those questions answered. So then you can safely innovate without all this complexity of processes at the end of the day. Cool. That's the control, and that's using a lot of data mesh principles around autonomy too within it. The specific is being, pinpointing your use case. I know Copilot's going to be across all Office 365, but if you've got specific documents that are very niche, such as contract, we believe that contract is going to be one of the biggest use cases analysis, then it's going to be quite repeatable. But when you got 20,000 contract, how do you actually analyze it? And this is where you can train and tune it for that specific use case so you can get more accuracy out of it, okay? And the last one is autonomy, which is really the data mesh, allows you to rapidly innovate. So we put you in guardrails so the technology team can innovate quickly as possible. And once it goes in there, you don't splash out of that sandbox environment and create some mistakes that could lead to brand or security damage at the end of the day. So it's really letting the teams innovate in a safe place at a very high level. Hopefully it's making sense to everyone. And I guess this is the solution, or architecture, we can call it, at a very high level. What it is really built on is, we're building this as a landing zone architecture following Azure best practices. So that is fundamentals to what we do in DataEngine. We like to make sure things are scalable. We are looking at network integration, automation. So this whole solution is going to be, it's fully automated. So the time to value or the time to build is fairly quick. So we put the guardrails, the processes, the practices, everything around it so you can get quick outcomes. We also are providing monitoring and services around it. And then within it, you'll have data stores, machine learning capability, OpenAI, data governance, integration. And sometimes certain things may not be solved by, the OpenAI service, but there's other tools on Azure that can provide you better outcomes. So this is the guidelines we'll give you and give you a safe area to innovate with Azure ML potentially as a whole. So this is what we're building, is something that allows you to innovate. And then integration patterns. Everyone knows integration is bloody hard, although everyone says it's really easy. But we're going to give you off-the-shelf integration patterns and code books to assist you with integrating into common services. And really what we're going to do is really the fundamentals is to give the executive confidence that when you build this environment and you feed data into it, those guidelines and policies, like one of the things that we're going to do is give your end users the guidelines on how to use the service, what to do and what not to do. So a lot of executives and boards are now coming out with what is the AI usage policy. So we're going to help with that. We're also going to help with guidelines. And then we're also going to help with data governance practices as a very high level. Now, one thing I just wanted to mention is this is built into your tenancy. So it's not like we build this into DataEngine's tenancy. We're going to come and build this into your management groups or into your subscriptions, your architecture, so you can run and water and feed this environment at the end of the day. So really, we're adding the wrapper, safety wrapper around it, the seatbelts, the airbags around your generative AI, and giving confidence by giving that checklist that this has got 5-star ratings for your generative AI, so you can move faster in your business to leverage this thing and innovate at a very high level. And that's pretty much it, team. So I guess we're doing the launch today. So you're going to see more on social media from DataEngine. If you have questions, Indra's here, I'm here, or you can reach out to us. And we'd love to figure out how we can create a safe place so your executives and your business can trust all the cool things that Dan was talking about, and we can put a wrap around it so you can move faster across the business. We're going to skip the demo, I think.
Yeah, that's the link to the demo.
Yeah, we've got a demo that we could share out, but it's basically that safe, secure environment for you to innovate. Now back to you guys again.
Oh, thank you so much, Akash, for presenting that, and Indira, just spotlighting you. So congratulations on that product launch, and I see you're also hiring on your LinkedIn profile, so excited to see your team growth as well. Exciting stuff. So we're just going to close out with a few open mic questions. We did have a lot of questions on Daniel's topic for OpenAI. There was one really good one that I'd like to point out, Dan, if you can come back on and just answer it for the purpose of the recording. And this one comes from Kishan. Apologies if I mispronounced that. It's, how do I provide granular access to certain users bringing their own data? And how do I restrict access to users which they are not supposed to access that data?
Such an awesome question. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that one. This is really data. One of the key questions we get asked is, okay, so I put all this data into a big blob storage account and I've given the model access to it, but everyone can access it. Perhaps they shouldn't be able to, and it should be if I as a user don't have access to that data, the model shouldn't have access to it either. So this is actually something you'd have to implement yourself. Now, you could add additional information into the index to say this is the permission required, or methodology to say this is how I would restrict access and who gets access to this particular document. But you would then need an interface or a service or part of your application that is able to look at that data and say, should Dan have access to that? No, he shouldn't. So the model shouldn't be allowed to either. So you're actually going to have to implement that. Now, I think we see that in a lot of other being built into a lot of other services and applications, being enterprise, other co-pilots will all have that in. But if you're building this yourself, you will need to do that. So that is why think about what your requirements are, decide if that is something you're going to need, and figure out ahead of time what that's going to look like for you. But there's lots of other companies doing it. But an excellent question.
Oh, thank you so much. And we had another good question that you had quite a long answer to, but I think it's really good to point this out, because we do have different versions of OpenAI, just like we have different versions of Copilot. So Emmanuel asks, what is the difference from consuming from Azure OpenAI versus directly consuming from OpenAI?
Another awesome question. So there's obviously, you can go and use the models as provided by OpenAI, the company, or you can use them inside Azure OpenAI. And there are a number of differences. The main one being that you will have your own endpoint and you're able to secure and control that endpoint, put it inside a VNet, that sort of stuff. You also get additional monitoring options. You can, monitor the endpoint through your traditional Azure monitor tools. You can also, and this I think is glossed over a lot, is use Azure AD authentication tokens, Entra ID, Entra ID authentication tokens to authenticate rather than a key. That's another key difference. There is also Microsoft adds responsible AI filters across both the input and the output. That's very important to Microsoft. It's an important principle we are keen to uphold. So there are additional filters. You can also have multiple deployments of each model. So perhaps you're building a multi-tenant SaaS solution. You might have a model deployment for every customer, and you allocate them a certain number of transactions or tokens per second, 10 tokens per minute, and you can restrict. So you can do a whole lot of different things. You have different content, as I mentioned. The account team, can't trust the account team. They're all going to have additional content filters. So those are just some of them, but fundamentally they're the same models. You do need to look at the version. For example, the 0613 GPT-3.5 Turbo has a feature in the API surface called Functions that is coming to Azure OpenAI Service as well, but it often is a little bit further behind because we need to validate and verify all that responsible AI, those models are safe to use, and we do a bunch of additional checks. The other thing, the final thing I'd add is Sudhir pointed out there is a link on the privacy, and I did mention that in the slide. That covers how the data is protected and used. That is probably the most important difference. And when we're talking about this, right, this is the key, and Akash talked about it as well. So have a look at that document. I'd highly recommend everyone look at it regardless, because it's just such an important thing to be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. Particularly as a lot of companies have decided to block GPT and OpenAI before this was announced yesterday during Ignite. So now they have to go back and review. It's like, oh, so we can actually put security protocols on these endpoints and how we manage these documents and our users.
Yeah.
I just have got two more questions in the chat that you've already answered, so I'm not going to put you on the spot, mate. So one is from Jerry. If we update the documents and storage account, will we need to do anything to update the model, such as re-indexing?
So perfect question. Thanks, Jerry, for asking that one. So The models you don't have to update. They actually can never be updated. They are a fixed entity. You can never retrain a model. We can't, and you can't. But if you add new documents or change the documents in that storage account, right now you will need to delete your cog search index and recreate it, right? So you will need to basically delete that. It's very quick and easy to delete, but you can go and then click the button, create the index again. It'll grab all the documents, chunk them up, stick them in the index. Sadia mentioned scheduling that. That's going to be a great way to do that. I think in future we'll see this all automated. Once this is GA, it'll be very, very transparent. There is actually a whole lot of things you can do with automated in cognitive search. You can actually watch the storage account for you and do a bunch of this stuff with custom skills, and we don't need to go there. You can get as advanced as you want, but fundamentally the takeaway is you will need to recreate the index right now, but not hopefully in future.
Would that be much of a hassle?
No, I mean, I would say if your documents are changing daily, hourly, that might be a bit of a hassle. But if your documents are fairly fixed, or you don't have to do them very often, it's not a big deal. But if you've got 10 million documents, that's a different question. So it is going to depend on the number of documents you have. The other thing you can do as well is you can manage that index yourself. I didn't show you doing that, so you can do all the heavy lifting yourself. But that's what I demoed today was designed around, hey, look, let's just get something out there. Let's show you what you can do, and then you move on from that.
Yeah, I'd imagine a lot of businesses would like to input a large corpus of documents if they wanted to really go hard at this option of utilising OpenAI. So I'd imagine in future iterations of OpenAI that they would actually have a process for managing any updates to the models and indexing in that use case scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't talk about semantic indexes or vector searches. Those deserve their own topic entirely. But yeah, we will see so much change, so much growth and change in this space. But semantic indexes would make the index search much more powerful in understanding what we're actually looking up. There's also, great jumps forward in what is the relevant document that should go into content that should go into the index. Do we change everything? There's also looks at using actual source code in these indexes. How do you build your own index of your source code? And there's stuff we could talk about forever, but there's amazing stuff happening out there.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I just do have one last question because there were a few scratches on the head in the chat. We had from Ayman, apologies if I got that wrong. Is the chunk size based on the model context length? So could you sort of briefly describe what's the purpose of embedding and tokening for documents, how 3 documents became 59?
It's another great question. So chunking is the process of saying, well, the model can only accept, say, let's take GPT-3 16K, that is going to accept 16,000 tokens. Now, right now, the chunking is not based on token length of the model, right? Which is an important thing, because if the chunks were beyond 16K, we would run into basically the prompt would be too large. And what if chunks are typically designed to be around about a paragraph or two? So well under that the chunking process will automatically do that. There's a lot of work happening around overlapping chunking windows and other things that will probably make its way into this. If you're interesting, have a look at something called semantic kernel, which they are building a lot of tooling into the chunking process. There's a lot of discussion happening around the best way to chunk and break down documents. Definitely have a look at that framework or that SDK see what is happening there. Lane Chain is doing the same. There's a lot of discussion in chunking and how we do it right. But the answer is no, it is not based on the model type that you're using. It is much smaller chunks than that. The process will try and avoid over making a prompt that is longer than your context window. And that is actually done on the front end.
Awesome. I put some links in the chat window as well, just to help those on the call try to understand the concept of embedding and chunking. Hopefully those links are also in your PowerPoint when we share it on the Meetup group channel as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't actually talk about embedding. That talks that I forgot that was a question, but I won't go into that now. That is vector indexing, so that is converting chunks into a vector representation of the meaning of that, and then chucking that in a database and using a semantic index. That's a private preview feature of Cog Search. Anyway, again, it deserves its own call.
Okay, I'm looking forward to part 2 of this. You're on the stage next month, I suspect. So we've actually got a couple more questions, and I can see Luke is answering some of them, but they're actually quite good questions, at least in my opinion. And one of them is from Eric. Is it possible or a future plan to integrate other knowledge management platforms such as Confluence? So that's not only based on the static file documents in storage accounts. So,
great question. Currently, I don't know, at least in the Azure OpenAI Service window, I don't know if that's planned. However, you can, of course, build your own index. So you could build it out of anything. You could grab it out of Confluence, Markdown in GitHub. You could, wherever your data is, you can put it into the index yourself. I expect we're going to see lots of tools doing that. There's also a lot of the frameworks like LangChain and Semantic Kernel. They all support memories or connectors or what their current term is. They can pick up, you can just feed whatever documents you like into the service and have it stored as a memory, and then use that as part of your prompting service. But again, it's your work, the work you need to do. So this is more intended as a let's get you started, and then as you evolve, you can change your approach, add different document sources, build your own, and you might have multiple indexes for different teams. You can do all sorts of stuff.
Oh, brilliant. And Luke, I don't know if you want to come off mute, mate, but I did see you put in also an answer to that question that there are more OpenAI plugins coming. So we do suspect a lot more organizations will be releasing their plugin to be able to support OpenAI in the coming future.
Yeah, my comment was that I expect a lot of these, like for Confluence, Jira as an example, will be releasing their own plugins, and like Microsoft has confirmed that there's going to be interoperability between OpenAI, like plugins as part of ChatGPT, and then Azure OpenAI as well. So like, why reinvent the wheel, right? But it's still very much early stages, but it's going to be really interesting to see.
Totally agree. There's so what we have announced that we have adopted the OpenAI standard for plugin formats. So if you build a plugin that makes your service accessible inside OpenAI, it will be accessible in Bing, Bing Chat, Bing Chat Enterprise, Copilots, you name it. If it's been built using this technology, those plugins will be compatible. Now you can go build your own plugins right now, and they will work. They also work with Semantic Kernel, as I talked about. So they're actually giving away prizes. If you go build your own plugins, if you've got an app and you've got APIs, you can build plugins pretty quickly and easily, make them available inside all of these services. It's going to be really cool. So I'll drop some links in the chat on how to get that started really quickly on that.
Oh, brilliant. Before you go back to the chat, I do have another question. Daniel, I'm making you sweat, mate. So data sovereignty, I know it's different in New Zealand where we look at data sovereignty versus data residency according to how the Maori see their data being used. But how do we see data sovereignty being used in the UK, like for example, East US or UK? Is the data handled differently?
Well, it's not handled also. No, it's really not. I mean, the thing is, it's a great question, but it's not. The data isn't handled differently in those regions. But if you are wanting to use an Azure OpenAI service that is outside of region, either because it's not available in the region you're in or your data's in, you do need to understand what is your data sovereignty, what is your data residency requirements. Both of those things may matter. So you need to have a good answer to that question. And if the answer is, I can't use this model, there is other, I can't use Azure OpenAI Service. You can use things like Llama 2 models. We've announced that Llama 2 and Falcon 2 models are all available, Hugging Face models. You can actually run your own models in your own GPUs. The challenge there becomes you are paying for a GPU even if you're not using it. So it's not a consumption service. That said, it may be a very, very reasonable alternative for you. So you can go into Azure ML right now, pick one of these newer large foundational models, Llama 2, Falcon 2, anything off Hugging Face, deploy it, manage yourself if in the region that you choose to use it. So if it's not available in Australia, which it's not, and you need to available in Australia, give one of those a try.
Fantastic. Do you want me to keep banging you on with more questions?
Up to people. They
keep coming.
Hey team, I think we are getting a bit of drop off now that it's 1:30. We're down to about half the crew remaining. Chimes, would you mind just flicking up that slide with the feedback?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before more people drop off, we'd actually love to hear from you about what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in future. Because this meetup, this user group is for all of us, right? It's not just for us organizers. So please let us know your thoughts, and then we do take it to heart and we try and make improvements where we can.
Yeah. Ultimately, these sessions are designed for you and the community. It's about what you want to hear and learn about. And again, I'll put up the link again if you would like to be our next speaker and share your own war stories and own experiences with some of the services for different solution scenarios. But otherwise, if you'd like to see more of a certain topic, or if you'd like to see more of a certain person, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you. So what I'll do is I'm going to stop recording, but just confirming that all the PowerPoints and this recording a link to it will be made available on the Aotearoa Azure Meetup group site. And the links as well to all the content that was discussed today. So thank you everyone for joining, and take care.
Thank you guys.
Thanks everyone.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Cheers all. Bye.
See ya.